What's going on, guys? You see a Jaguar back here with GenJag.com, and the much anticipated 2018 NFL Draft has concluded, and the Jaguars picks are all in the books. Now, in this video, I want to go through and basically give you a short little recap of every pick that we had from rounds 1 through 7. And then tomorrow or the next day, I'll probably drop a video kind of giving some takeaways just from an overview of the whole NFL draft in general. From the Jaguars standpoint. Now, the Jaguars really went best available player in this draft. Nobody really saw a defensive tackle coming first, and we picked a lot more defensive players than really to be expected. So let's go ahead and break this down from draft pick in the first round to our very final couple picks in the 7th round. Let's get it.
Last name ever, first name greatest, like a sprained ankle, boy, ain't nothing to play with.
So the pick that took Jaguar fans and the NFL by surprise was the Jaguars drafting Florida defensive tackle Taven Bryan with a 29 overall pick. Now, a lot of Jaguar fans are obviously expecting to go offense, whether it be offensive line, wide receiver, tight end, whatever you may have it. But the Jaguars, if you look at what their strengths of the team are, the very strongest position going into this draft was the defensive line. So, a lot of times in past drafts, we look at it and say, okay, we need the first pick to be this so they can plug in and start this position right away. Because obviously we're used to picking in the top 5, but things get a little trickier once you pick at the end of the first round. So the Jaguars went definitely with their best available player on the board, and that was drafting defensive tackle Taven Bryan. And it honestly does make a lot of sense just because the 3 guys that the Jaguars have in the interior of the defensive line with Avery Jones, Malik Jackson, and Marcel Darius are all very high money guys. So, we might be able to bring out another year and, each of those guys and decide, which one of those guys you want to decide to move on from to be able to bring in Taven Bryan on that cheaper contract. Now, I know when the pick first went out, I got a lot of kind of hate for saying that, my initial reaction was that either Marcel Darius, Avery Jones, or Malik Jackson were going to be cut. And just the reason why I kind of said that was because the Jaguars had 4 defensive tackles on the team last year, with the guy from Houston, Eli Ankou, being that 4th defensive tackle. But on game day, the Jaguars only kept 3 defensive tackles active. So, are you going to keep your first round pick inactive on game day? Are you going to, what are you going to do with these other guys? The other guys are too expensive to really make inactive. So I just didn't think there was much room for the guys. But, and also you kind of look at it special teams wise, defensive tackles aren't usually key, kind of key special teams roles. Usually those kind of things go to the backup defensive backs, backup linebackers, kind of backup wide receivers, tight ends, stuff like that. So, I just thought that, where's the room to kind of keep an extra defensive tackle like that? But, if they have an 8-man kind of rotation going on where, 4 interior defensive linemen are getting about equal snaps, and you also have your 4 defensive ends getting about equal snaps, then it does make a little more sense. But that was just kind of where I was coming from with that. But, Taven Bryan, he's had a lot of J.J. Watt kind of upside comparisons. Now, before I call him J.J. Watt, he's got to actually produce on the field. But, he was kind of a one-year wonder kind of thing. But he was definitely drafted upon potential. And if you look at a lot of the mock drafts, a lot of the guys, these experts kind of had him going into the top 20. So I'm really excited to kind of dig into his tape to kind of see what he has to offer. I mean, he has a very quick get off, very high motor. He looks like he plays with a lot of passion. He's a blue-collar player, doing a lot of construction type of stuff with his dad growing up. So, he's going to be a really hard worker and just a Tom Coughlin type and Doug Marrone type of dude. So, it'll be really fun to kind of see what this guy has to offer for hopefully several years to come. Now, in the 2nd round, we got might be my favorite pick of the draft, and that was Jaguars drafting wide receiver DJ Chark out of LSU. Now, this guy was kind of rising a lot toward the offseason once, he had a really good Senior Bowl, a really good combine, and this is the type of receiver that I felt the Jaguars needed to get. I saw mock drafts kind of projecting us to get, guys like Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk, people like this, but I really thought that, the kind of wide receiver we needed to get was a guy like him. He's 6'3", he's got 4'3" speed, and, we needed that big type of receiver to be able to form into that wide receiver number one. The only really wide receiver number one that we kind of had on the roster was Dante Moncrief, who's on a one-year deal, coming off a couple down years with injuries, so we bring in a guy like DJ Chark, we got him under contract for the next 4 years, and with him being 6'3", 4'3" speed, he's a great run blocker. He can also play special teams very well, at punt return, kick return, what so have you. And, this might, being that we have him and now we have D.D. Westbrook also, we have two guys that can do punt return, so it might make a guy like Jadon Mickens expendable if, you can rely on these two guys to do punt return, because Marquise Lee can kind of do the same thing. But he's a guy that was kind of held back by bad QB play at LSU. LSU runs that kind of run-heavy offense. So this guy's kind of going to see his best years to come, I think, in the NFL. So it was a great value to get him. The Jaguars were really trying to move up in the draft to get him. But, you don't want to trade any of your picks in the top 4 rounds, honestly, because those are kind of your money picks. And, you don't have a 5th-round pick to kind of give up. You have a pick at the later round of the 6th round than a couple 7th-round picks. So they had to stand pat, and they wound up getting their guy. Great value to fit a need for the Jaguars. Now in the 3rd round, we drafted safety Ronnie Harrison from Alabama. Now this was, of course, a best available player kind of situation. And if you look at our safety position, it really lacks true depth at the position. I mean, you have Jared Wilson back there. And that's pretty much it backing them up. You got some guys that you kind of signed on the 90-man roster, but you also look at kind of the price tags on your guy. You have an expensive strong safety in Barry Church, an expensive free safety in Tashawn Gibson. Now, Ronnie Harrison is more of a strong safety, but he's a guy that can be pretty versatile. He can play in a strong safety role and a free safety role, and he can cover tight ends well. He's a very good hitter, and Mike Mayock had him as his 34th ranked player in the NFL draft, and we got him at the tail end of the 3rd round. So that's excellent value to get in a guy like him. And, of course, the Jaguars draft best available player. And, these are the kind of things that you have to do when you have a team with a great roster. You know what I mean? You got to get, like I've been always saying this whole entire draft process, you've got to get young guys on these cheap contracts to be able to replace those more expensive guys. So this isn't a guy that needs to be thrust into the starting lineup right away. He'll be able to kind of sit back there, but I feel the Jaguars will kind of cross-train him in the strong safety and free safety roles. So if any of those guys were to go down, he'll be able to slide in that spot very, very easily and be able to play at a pretty productive level. So he's a guy he's going to play a huge role in special teams this year. He's obviously going to be a backup, but I expect him to be a starter in 2019. Now in the 4th round, the Jaguars drafted right tackle Will Richardson, and you guys might have been kind of tired about me talking about offensive line kind of all throughout the whole free agency draft kind of process, but offensive line is very, very important, and I'm glad that we were able to address offensive line with one of our money picks, as I say. We drafted him in the 4th round. He's a guy that is kind of dropped in the draft process just due to some of his off-field stuff, getting a DWI a couple years ago. He served a couple of game suspension in 2017, but he's a guy that's going to be, he played right tackle. He's probably going to be Jeremy Parnell's replacement in the years to come, and he's also played a little bit of left tackle. So he's a guy who can come in. We can kind of move him around a little bit to see if he's better at right tackle, right guard, work him at left tackle a little bit to kind of be that swing guy. And he's got a pretty good upside, 6'6", 306 pounds. If you listen to his draft call when David Caldwell called him up, he was very, very emotional, which is pretty cool just because, you want to have guys in your team that are really into the game. And it seems like he's a guy that really likes football, who, I guess had a little bit of maturity issues going into, kind of in college. But, you get some of that with these kind of players. And, even Cam Robinson had some trouble in, his college years. So, Will Richardson, it'll be exciting to kind of see what he has to offer. And, we got an offensive lineman in the top 4 rounds. We got 2 big guys, and you can really never have enough of those guys, especially, even that offensive line where guys are getting injured all the time. 5 out of your 11 players are on the offensive line. So it's wise to keep that position strong. And another thing about him was he had to go up against Bradley Chubb in practice. Him at defensive end. So he's pretty battle tested when it comes to playing guys with obviously high level of production. Now, the Jaguars did not have a 5th round pick, and this was from the Marcel Darius trade. It was initially a 6th round pick, but it turned into a 5th round pick once the Jaguars made the playoffs. So I will take that trade off any day of the week. And in the 6th round, we decided to draft Tanner Lee. Now, this pick was highly dissed by a lot of the national media. If you look at him, he's got a good body type. He's 6'4", but he throws kind of a lot of interceptions. He has a bad touchdown to interception ratio. He has a pretty low completion percentage, ranging around a 55 to 56% completion percentage. And, it's unfortunate because Luke Falk out of Western Kentucky was picked by the damn Titans 4 picks before we picked this guy. But, I really wasn't expecting the Jaguars to take a quarterback in the first 4 rounds, even though the national media kind of wants to shove it down your throat that they will, just because, if you listen to any of Tom Coughlin's press conferences, he speaks so highly of Blake Bortles, and they really do believe in their upside. So, 6th round pick, it's a good position to pick a quarterback, kind of take a flyer on him. If we were to pick a guy in the top 4 rounds, I would want the coaches to expect them to be a potential franchise quarterback and not just drafting him for what, a bunch of fans like to say, if Blake Bortles does suck this year. Because if they're drafting based on, Blake Bortles might suck this year, so let's get this guy in the 3rd round just because he's a quarterback. It's a loser mindset for a team that wants to win a Super Bowl. So they draft Tanner Lee. I honestly don't expect him to make a roster. Probably a practice squad guy. I feel like the Jaguars will probably carry 2 quarterbacks on the roster this year with Blake Bortles and newly acquired Cody Kessler from the Browns. Now, we had a couple of 7th round picks. Our first 7th round pick went toward Leon Jacobs, a linebacker out of Wisconsin. Now, the Jaguars finally kind of addressed the linebacker position, but it wasn't until the 7th round, so it kind of shows that the Jaguars have a lot of trust in Blair Brown. Blair Brown was a 5th round pick, an early 5th round pick, so the Jaguars probably had a 3rd round grade on him. They probably had him, picked him with an eye on, starting him later in his career, like now, But the strong side linebacker position, it's not too important a position as they're pretty much a 1-down player. Only the Jaguars really know what they have in Blair Brown, as he didn't get that many snaps last season, so the Jaguars get to see him every single practice, while we only really got to see him for a couple of games. So, I would expect Blair Brown to be in that starting linebacker position, but I guess competing with Leon Jacobs, don't know too much about him. I know that most of his production kind of came in his final year, and that the guy is absolutely jacked. So, we got Leon Jacobs, linebacker out of Wisconsin, with the 7th round pick. Now, our final 7th round pick, we drafted a punter, Logan Cook, out of Mississippi State. I'd much rather draft a punter in the 7th round than the 3rd round, but I guess the Jaguars saw Logan Cook and they wanted him to be kind of their punter of the future. Brad Nortman, he had a good first season with the Jaguars, but last season was not very good. Let this in some really crappy situations. He had some decent punts, but he had a lot of punts that really just set us up in bad territory. So, Nortman tailed off, and obviously he's cut now. So, Logan Cook is going to be our guy. So, we draft Logan Cook. Punters are a dime a dozen. If you really like the guy, just take a 7th round pick on him. If we were going to pick a positional guy right there, there's a good chance that he might not even make the team. So, Logan Cook, got him in the 7th round, so there's our punter for you. Better get him in the 7th round. In the 3rd round, shout out Gene Smith. But that kind of wraps up the Jaguars 2018 NFL Draft. I'm not going to give it a draft grade because I'm not really into that. You know, we'll probably revisit this in 2-3 years to really see how this draft class does. But, you know, I think it's good, man. I mean, we drafted SEC guys with our first 3 picks. You know, you got some big school guys. We got the offensive lineman that I wanted. We got a defensive tackle to add some depth there. And we also just got, you know, some good best available players kind of there instead of reaching for needs like, you know, probably 70% of the NFL has to do. But, yeah, I mean, the Jaguars roster is very, very good. You know, a lot of people put it as the best roster in the NFL. So, you know, we'll see how this all plays out. But, you know, very excited for OTAs to start up. Very excited for training camp and a 2018 regular season to get here. So, yeah, with all that said, this is UCO Jaguar with GenJag.com, and I'm out.
Duval. If you from a city, holla Duval.